Welcome everyone to our webinar where we talk about new ruling from SEC and how it's actually causing some trouble within the security community. And trouble I say because it's not just about this new ruling, there's new filing that I need to check box. It's actually now sitting down, looking at your security program and communicating with the board members because they're asking, because they're held responsible, they need to be informed. It's not just as simple as a checkbox anymore. In this session, we're going to be talking about how it overlaps with continuous security validation as well to measure the effectiveness of your security controls. So the days of just going and buying the fanciest tool and saying that I have it is not going to cut it. Now you also need to know how effective those security controls are, how it affects your security program. With me, I have an excellent panelist today, Aaron Logue-Smith and Burke Algan. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Aaron, why don't we start with yours?
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Logue-Smith. I am with Dell Technologies in their Global Technology Office. I'm in their Cyber and Compliance Practice Group. I'm actually a lawyer by trade. I've been working in data privacy and security for going on 14 years now. So I've really seen the ebb and flow of cybersecurity regulations and privacy regulations from the start of my legal career till now. So I love being asked to be here to have this discussion today.
Burke, the background of Burke is, by the way, he posted an amazing article on ISECA website, and I read it about continuous validation, and that's when I reached out to him and I said, hey, this is where we and the community would like to hear from you, your insights on the SEC guidelines and also the overlap between continuous security validation. Burke?
Awesome. Thank you, Victor. Really appreciate you connecting with me on the article. That was probably a few years back. But in terms of my background, I'm a fractional chief information security officer, meaning I work with companies on a part-time basis to help resolve their security needs and get them to a better security stance. Before that, I was an auditor, consultant in the cyberspace, and a practitioner in the banking industry for over 2 decades. And now I'm helping smaller companies these days.
Excellent. We love to have both of you here and talk about this topic. So I'll start with cybersecurity framework and standards. We all, when it comes to security program, we tend to align to a standard or framework so that it just helps us to kind of navigate through the program and have that plan of maturity where are we starting, where are we getting, and the gaps. So and given the SEC updated guidelines on cybersecurity disclosures, what frameworks or standards do you recommend now enterprises, security leaders adopt to align with these new requirements and ultimately enhance their security posture?
So here at Dell, we work with the NIST cybersecurity regulations on the most part. Most of our cyber resilience education and all of our products and practices are really based around the NIST cybersecurity requirements. I think most people here in the United States, as well as across the globe, are very well versed in those. NIST 2.0 just came out, so that's always, aside from the SEC new requirements, the new NIST 2.0 is like the new thing to be all excited about here in the cybersecurity world. Specifically, one of the major changes to NIST 2.0 was calling out, talking about, backups and recovery and making sure you have good data to recover whenever you do succumb to a devastating cyber event. So again, they're really shifting this focus from a government, oversight perspective towards this scrutiny on cybersecurity. So I think definitely anything around the new SEC requirements in this 2.0 would be a great framework to follow.
Yeah, and since everybody is jumping on that bandwagon, I also posted something last night on CSF 2.0. And I think, again, going back to the fundamentals, going back to the hygiene, and some of the clarifications is that CSF is not a compliance. I've seen companies saying that compliant with NIST CSF 2.0 or compliant with NIST CSF. I think NIST CSF really is that moral compass for your security program to realize that what do you need to do, where you need to get better, especially when these things comes out from SEC where you need to now worry about disclosure. So maybe it's more around you need to focus on respond and recover as well instead of just the first three functions. But when you're talking to our fellow CISOs and practitioners in the industry here, what are you hearing from them? Like they built a security program, they align themselves with the framework and standard, but SEC ruling comes out about disclosures now. What changes are they adopting in their security program that will help them to actually either do better at disclosures, or as simple as putting a plan around disclosures, how to do it?
Yeah, I'll start with actually adding something to what Aaron said in terms of the cybersecurity framework. So that, the security practitioners, or so-called geeks, right? They get excited. I get excited about this 2.0. But the other thing I get excited about the NIST is they have a quick start guide for small businesses in the 2.0 version. Some people may know about it, and some people may not. Because one thing that I observe, Victor, now working with smaller companies, is they get overwhelmed by NIST, right? I mean, NIST is big. The CSF is really, really big, very comprehensive, and that's what it's meant to be. So the small business guide may be a helpful starting point for smaller to mid-sized companies. Now, if you're a regulated financial institution or a government entity, obviously you may go for the bigger version. But anybody else, you may want to just start with the smaller version and then kind of work your way up to the main CSF. So that's one part. But the other part to your question is, how do people feel about what's going on in the industry with the SEC disclosure requirements now being in place? Most people are scared, right? So actually, so much so that people are even questioning whether they should have the CISO title in their name, because is SEC going to come after the people with that title specifically? No, of course, not the case. The idea behind SEC's disclosure requirement is really make the public aware of what's going on in a company's cybersecurity stance, one, and two, any major issues that they may be facing. So what happens is, when you, as an executive or a company, are scared, you start taking action, or you should. And if you don't, then the scare won't go away. So a lot of people are thinking about how to really take action, and one of the ways is aligning with these secure standards if they haven't. And most of the companies, as you mentioned, Victor, they say they are aligned, or they are compliant with this, or compliant with a different framework, which obviously may be an overstatement and on one hand, but on the other hand, are they really following the standards to the fullest degree? Probably not. So what they're doing is really taking a fresh look at their compliance stance, and that's where the continuous compliance, continuous monitoring activities kick in and help out.
And that's absolutely right. I think for those who think they are NIST CSF compliant, wrong statement, by the way, but there's no way. There's no way you could take all of the controls and actually implement line by line. It just doesn't work. The whole goal here is that here's a reference, tailor it, pick the tier that makes sense to you. It's really to actually first self-assess it, where you stand today, and what do you need to do, where you need to be, and fill that gap with people, process, technology. We talk about it all the time. I think one of the key here, what I'm hearing in the industry here, is that incident response is playing a great play here, because now SEC is saying that when it comes to disclosures, this is what you need to do. This is what we expect. And given it's a government body, everybody's thinking, okay, where's the first step where we inject that part as part of a workflow, instead of just treating that as an a la carte, where incident response is a great plan. Disclosures is part of incident response planning. So DRP, BCP, all of that comes into factor here. For those who have not done it or did it 5 years ago, they're actually picking up that playbook and saying, hey, is any of this even relevant? We thought that we will actually call Joe in legal to discuss, but Joe is gone already 3 years ago. We don't even know who replaced Joe. So I think this is forcing security leaders to actually go in, picking up the playbook of BCP, DRP, looking at the specific sections of disclosures, and making amends if needed. And what are you hearing from the customers in regards to disclosures and incident response planning, or just in general BCP, DRP?
So I think that, from the beginning, whenever I first read the proposed rules for the SEC, I began to really discuss, incident response planning with my customers. I was like, we've always talked about it. I've told you it's important. I think as we've grown throughout the pandemic, I think everyone is, we watch the news. We know that cyber attacks, cyber warfare on the regular are something that we have to prepare for more now than a flood or a fire or a hurricane. But I think whenever, I said that these roles were coming out, we had these discussions, it didn't really start to sink in that they were going to have some kind of incident response, really in-depth incident response planning, or having some kind of service or consultant come in for that, until some of the big attacks that happened at the end of the year around the casinos, and what they disclosed to the SEC and what the SEC had to say about their disclosures. And then again, SolarWinds, they are now slapping their CISO with his own personal fines. So I think now that we're, talking about the SEC rules forever, didn't do too much, but now actually seeing them in action, seeing what's going to come down the pipe from that incident response planning, now that's all everyone wants to talk about. So I think that's the real change that I've seen, and I'm really happy. This is great. It's not good that there's panic in the community, but incident response planning has always been probably one of the top priorities that everyone should have been embracing. And now that C-suite, they're on the line for it, it's going to become, the budgets are going to open up to really help that. So that's my perspective.
And that's how I see it as well. I think there's an opportunity and there is accountability here. So as you said, the C-suite is actually looking at it a little bit more closer, because their butts are on the line here. And now they are asking the CISOs or security leaders, hey, what do you need to make it right? So let's give you the money, but I'm going to hold you accountable. So it's not as simple as who's a good car salesman and come in and wow the board and gets all the money. No, it's a fair play now. What do you need? And I'm going to hold you accountable to it. It's not just you get the money and you just show me a shiny toy every now and then with a fancy report that some vendor generated for you. And no, it's not enough. When you're talking to our fellow CISOs and customers that you're helping, where do they see this? I feel like this is all over GDPR again, where GDPR until it actually implemented, people were not taking it seriously. So SEC, same. The guidelines are coming. When now it has teeth and it's coming your way, now customers are taking it seriously. Everybody in their vendor talks or conversations, they're like, how do we protect from SEC guidelines? Well, first of all, if you're doing your job right, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're not, then this is the right time to consider it. Where do we see our security practitioners to make change in their tactical plan as well? So strategy is one thing, but when it comes to just in general, tactical plan of security maturity, where do you see that shift just because SEC has implemented these guidelines and they know now they can be held accountable?
Right, and it is actually it is interesting. The last several months, I'm seeing it from two angles. So I used to work for a highly regulated bank, regulated by multiple institutions for many years. Now I'm working with companies that are private. Some may be going public in the future, maybe not. They are looking at it from two different angles. So if you're SEC regulated, in the sense that you're a public company, you're thinking about, one, do I have the right capabilities to know what's going on in my environment? So that's number one, because if you are required to disclose incidents within 4 business days per the regulation, you need to know there is an incident that's going on. Now you need to report it after you discover it. The problem is that if you're not equipped to discover it, then are you doing the right things? So the detective controls, the monitoring piece, really understanding the shape your controls are in becomes really important. So the CISOs are really looking at how to boost their security kind of monitoring, compliance monitoring stance. So that's number one. And number two, a lot of companies, actually all companies, know they have certain gaps, right? Maybe they are not breached yet, but there's a gap, there's a vulnerability which will be exploited at some point in the future. As we know, if there's a weakness somewhere, someone is going to take advantage of it at some point in the future. So they now have more bullets in their hand, in their in our pocket, they can go back to the CEO, back to the board, and say, "Hey, we know we are vulnerable here in this area. Say, we're not doing a good job in patching, or we're not doing a good job in this area. Let me get more resources. Let me get more money so I can do a better job." And in response, I'm going to come back to you with better statistics, better reports, and I'm going to show you, if I'm a good CISO, how improved we are based on these investments we made. So, what is the return on your security investment? So ROI on security. So I am more accountable for that, but you're more accountable for giving me what I want, because in the past you wouldn't have given me everything I wanted, because of the budget reasons, it is not seen as important. ACC is making it seem more important for not only the CISOs, but also the C-level executives and the board as well, which we will talk about.
I think the best quote I heard from one of our fellow security leaders, he said, "Thank you, SEC, for updating your guidelines, because now I can go to my board and speak business language that they understand, which is this is coming. So if you don't listen to me today, this is coming your way." So I think that's the best one. Like bridging the gap between business and IT and security. Now it's as simple that we need to have disclosures. In order to do a good hygiene, I need to have a good security program and measure the effectiveness of it so that I can inform you, the board. So I think that's where the business language, business part comes in. Um, and have you seen a shift when it comes to security leaders going in front of the board and begging slash asking for money or resources or people? That's always been my pet peeve, that every board member, every CEO will say, yes, we need to invest in security. The minute you come up with 5 recs that I need security engineers or architects, or these unicorns I need, they're like, oh, no, let's not do that. Let's repurpose our IT people because they are security as well, which is great, but they have a day job as well. So is SEC guidelines, is that helping people to hire right talent in their companies when it comes to just in general security program?
So I haven't seen that yet. I was hopeful, and I think I still am. I think we're still early on, and it's kind of the new year here at Dell. We just kicked off our new year, so it's always different. I'm hoping that it will create an influx of more qualified individuals now that we see the ramifications of actually being able to do the investigation. That 4-day window is very tight, and then you have to decide if it's a material breach or not. There's a lot of investigation that has to go behind that. And then the question really too, like, if what we disclose could put us potentially at risk in the future. So companies are being very careful about what they're actually disclosing to the SEC, even though they probably should be giving more information. We're getting the feel from the SEC that what's being provided isn't going to be adequate moving forward. I think now that we're seeing, again, the ramifications of how the SEC is responding to the way companies are also, doing their investigation and putting that material together for the SEC. I think now that they're seeing that if what they're doing isn't good enough, I hope that the influx of, talent will go up as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'll pull that string where you mentioned the impact of disclosure on cybersecurity strategy. Now, it's not as simple as that. I have one IT guy who's also a security person where I need to configure a firewall or my antivirus rules, but it's now the SEC emphasizes the importance of disclosing material cybersecurity incidents. So first, go define that material or not. But how should enterprises just balance that transparency with the risk of exposing vulnerabilities, or like where my weak spots are to potential attackers for future cyber attacks or further cyber attacks? So if I had a material breach or incident, I disclose it today, maybe I'm giving way too much information. That's what I alluded to. So where is the balance, and who's defining that balance?
It is really tough. I don't think people know it. And if anybody comes and says they figured it out and they know exactly what the balance should be, I think they may be overstretching the reality there. My My guess is going to take a while, right? Just like any rule, it will take a while. It took a while with GDPR. It took a while with other regulations. It will take a while for the companies and SEC to figure out. SEC doesn't really know what they want to hear. They just said they want to hear stuff. And if you think about the SEC point of view, and by the way, I used to be an auditor for a long time, audited public companies. SEC really wanted to know more about the financial statement impact of incidents in the organization. And the auditors, as an auditor, I used to ask a question. As an LT, I used to be asked the question, have you seen any cybersecurity incidents in your environment? Now, that question almost becomes irrelevant now, because if you have seen it, you should have reported it, right? So one angle companies could take is say, hey, the regulator that is asking the question, they are more focused on financial reporting. So let me start there. Fair enough, but that's not enough, because we know today that every single part of the organization could lead to financial statement issues, right? So it might be in the marketing part, which is not related to financial statements, but it might lead to reputational issues, might lead to revenue issues, and that eventually will lead to financial statement issues. SEC wants to hear all about that. So they didn't really clarify. So to Aaron's point and to your point, the companies really are under the burden of defining what material means to them. So you can start with the financial statements as a first part because of the SEC being the regulator asking for it. But you really need to expand to what is really important to you. And it goes back to basics. Funny enough, you really need to know what your assets are. So what is your asset inventory? Funny enough, but most companies still don't know. Why those assets are important to your business. So the business impact assessment, really understand. And if your business impact assessment is saying that these assets are important for your business and that asset got breached, well, that is a likely case for you to disclose that incident because it is material to your particular business and business line. That might be one way to do it. So if I were to design from scratch, what I would do is really think about assets, business continuity, cyber risk management, cybersecurity, and risk management as a whole, and bring them all together. I probably would have given you the same answer a year ago. Now there's more urgency around it, given the rules and regulations being changing. And now, to Aaron's point, the CISO and everybody else have a little bit more urgency, right? Now there's more urgency because, yes, if you are the CISO being caught and not disclosing the incident at the right time or really not reacting to it at the right time, you are in trouble. So you are more incentivized to bring those groups together and to make this a reality. That's what I'm seeing changing in the industry.
It's funny how, in cybersecurity industry, when it comes to these sort of things, it always takes time to adopt. And we talk about it. We started with GDPR, CCPA, now SEC ruling. Like, we hear about it like for year after year. This is not something happened this year, right? We all heard about it last year and the previous year. So when it comes to adoption rates, I think social media platforms have a better chance. I was just doing some research. When TikTok came out, it's 76 days for adoption rate. Like it just caught fire. 76 days. When it comes to SEC ruling, GDPR, the average is 1,100 days. 1,100. What? Come on. So I think it's bizarre when it comes to adoption, because at the same time, I understand there's so many moving parts. And one thing, Burke, you said that where it comes to, it's not just about having the control now, it's about like effectiveness. And that's your area of expertise. And I want to talk about it. Continuous security validation. You wrote an article that's where we connected. And I know in security industry, it's still something new that people are adopting. But I think it's important now, where security programs are not considered just insurance that, well, you're not breached, that means you can continue investing because it's insurance. Now the board and the CISOs are asking, okay, how effective those controls are. So again, back to asset management, endpoint management. Yes, I want to know if a threat is coming my way. Can I detect it? Can I protect it? Can I respond? Can I recover? Like all of those 5 functions we talk about in CSF, where Now I also want to know the effectiveness of those tools. So SEC came out with these guidelines. Is there any ripple effect? Do you see any changes to the mindset where companies, customers are adopting more of this concept of continuous security validation, which will help them ultimately to be prepared and improve for these SEC guidelines?
Slowly, but yes, I think that's where we're going. That's where we wanted to go for so long. And I would say maybe a decade or so ago, some companies started coming into the marketplace saying that we can actually provide you with continuous secure monitoring capabilities. The market was not mature. It is maturing now, but first I want to talk about the mindset, right? So as a CISO, now you're under the gun and the board is under the gun in terms of disclosure requirements and personal accountability that comes with it, to Aaron's point, with what happened with SolarWinds and so on. So now you are more incentivized to continuously monitor and ask for budget to help you do that. So good news, bad news, as always. So the good news is, for me, use of cloud now is becoming so prevalent, right? So AWS came into marketplace in 2006. At the time, nobody really cared about cloud. Now, if you are not going cloud first, especially as a small company, you are doing something wrong, or you're doing something very, very different. So most companies are going to cloud. Why is that good? I mean, there's always all the risks and oversight requirements and outsourcing and vendor management, all these things. Putting those aside, why is that good? Because cloud gives you, as a cybersecurity practitioner or CISO, the ability to continuously monitor the security stance of those cloud applications, IS application, IS, platforms, and so on a more continuous basis, right? Because if you think about like a legacy system like AS400 and whatnot, they don't really give you that ability to continuously monitor its configurations, right? But the continuous monitoring is now evolving on the shoulders of these cloud providers. So on one hand, the providers like AWS and so on, they give you a lot of capabilities to monitor their environment. They have their native tools. And then there are providers that help plug into those applications, into those platforms, and monitor on a continuous basis the configurations. Is it enough? No, but it's a starting point. So I feel much better as a CISO that I can see that there's a configuration change in my AWS environment, like the moment it happens, and I can actually go chase it down, versus I do a multi-review and figure out like 29 days ago somebody changed the configuration, and I need to figure out first why, and second, like if it's an unauthorized change, has something really bad happened. In the world of auditing, it's a substantive audit, which is a pain. So the cloud is enabling, to some extent, the ability to continuously monitor. So that's one part. The other part is there is a lot of incentive for the CISOs to improve their red teaming, blue teaming, some call the purple teaming exercises, meaning you want to take the point of attacker and try to see if you can hack your own system and what the vulnerabilities are. And if you think about it, a lot of CISOs try to do it for many, many years, but it is very hard. A common framework that I referenced in my article, and a lot of people know, is the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which basically gives you, an a la carte option of how you can attack yourself, what the most common vulnerabilities are, and how you can exploit your own weaknesses. In obviously with the goal of fixing those right as soon as possible. So companies, CISOs, are now more incentivized to use those frameworks, plus the vendors, hopefully leveraging the capabilities of cloud. And all of these security vendors and monitoring vendors are themselves on the cloud as well,
Yeah.
and really bring them all together. Is it easy? It is not, because a lot of companies not only operate cloud, they also operate legacy systems. They are not ready to make that shift. And to Aaron's point, they really lack the resources, right? So they really need the people with the right mindset and right skill set to make this happen. I'll leave it at that, and turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, I am there with you when you gave AS400 example, but the kids in the audience here, they are actually Googling what is
that, right?
AS400. So just jokes aside, I think that's very true. That is very true. I think the MITRE attack framework, again, as a reference, as your rubric when you're trying to figure out the tactical plan for your security program, can really help you. And let me ask you this. We talked a lot about CISO's responsibility when it comes to SEC guidance, and the guidelines came out. Now, what they have to do, mature their security program. They have to think about the disclosures. They have to think about what to call material incidents. Let's flip the conversation for governance, where now what is board's responsibility? So what question should the board member ask CISO? What things that or strategies boards have to implement so that they can hold CISO accountable or the program and see the maturity in more of a quantified way instead of high, medium, low, green, yellow, red. Instead of that, how do they quantify their investment and make sure that they're doing everything in their power to align with the guidelines?
So we call it a good, better, best, green, red, yellow, we can go around the horn on that. I think that, the C-suite executives, one of the major, shifts in the paradigm that we're seeing with the new SEC requirements is that it's no longer, the board has to know, but it's no longer like security's here, the backup folks are here, the compliance folks are here, the risk folks, legal, like we're no longer in these silos where nobody's talking to each other. So one of the biggest things I'm seeing coming out of these new regulations is all of these groups within an organization have to have stakeholders that are being held accountable. Everyone has to learn to work together, to play together in the sandbox. They have to be able to do these deep investigations, the material breach investigations, and they have to do it from a risk, a compliance, a legal, and a security and a backup perspective. We want that resiliency, holistic framework in place. And then they also have to talk to the C-suite. So the C-suite executives can't just pretend that they don't know what's going on. They can't ask any questions. They need to, be briefed from this holistic posture. So it's not, I don't think that just the CISO should be the one that's being held accountable, the only person that's going to be talking to the board. But I think for the most part, to answer the direct question, that was a long-winded way of getting there, is I think the board needs to be asking that their CISO, the questions of, what are we doing to ramp up our incident response planning? What are we doing to bolster our cyber resiliency posture? So what policies, procedures, what kind of architecture are we putting in place from a technology perspective? What kind of architecture are we building out to ensure that we're preventing these vulnerabilities and that we're really, bolstering our recovery posture, that we have some kind of isolated immutable copy that's being clean, like NIST, required us to have this clean backup. So we want to have some kind of scanning capabilities. We have to know what we're housing. So the C-suite has to get really more depth and breadth in this technology, cybersecurity, but also that cyber resiliency posture to make sure that we're protecting from the front end, that cybersecurity piece. We have that incident response piece here in the middle, and then that recovery piece in the back end. Because when we do have to disclose in those material breach reports, we're going to expose our vulnerabilities, but what are we doing to protect those and patch those up to prevent those breaches from happening again?
But when we are going and talking about SEC guidelines to our fellow security leaders or customers, and it's a question that almost all the board members have asked, that hey, I'm not technical enough. That's why I hired CISOs or the security teams. Now you want me to get trained in the technical terms as well, so I can ask you right questions. Where is that balance? Like, and who's supposed to train the board members? Is it they have to go get their own independent trainings or hire a vendor who would actually give them enough information? Because not every board is lucky and fortunate to have members who are trained technical by either education or throughout experience. So now the conundrum is that where does the buck stops? Like if the board members are so much trained, then CISOs can do their job, because now the questions are like board members are getting in the way of maturing the program, or they have more power than CISO, though they can overrule some of the decisions. So where is that ending, or what is that looks like for you when you hear these?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question, Victor. The way I think about it is like I think we're all big fans of ISACA and what they bring to the table, right? So COBIT obviously has been dear to my heart for many years. If you look at COBIT, you'll see the main difference between governance and management, right? So CISO sits on the management side, and you need to have governance over CISO, and there are different levels of governance. But the board members obviously provide governance for their purposes, and they need to really know to some extent what questions to ask. To your point, they cannot just say, "Well, we hired the right CISO or hired the right team and let them do their work and let them tell us what we need to know." Those days are gone. So you need to really ask the right questions and do your due diligence responsibilities as as part of governance and the due diligence, right, as a board member. So a couple of things are happening, as I'm saying. One, if your board is a public board or if your company is a public company and your board of directors are now bound by SEC rules, maybe other rules as well, you may be looking into hiring a brand new board member, right, to sit on the board that is going to help you with cybersecurity. So that's one option. So advantages, disadvantages. Advantages, obviously, now you have a person that you can, look to and say, hey, Aaron, if you're the board member, what are you seeing? What the question, go and ask all the questions because you know what to ask. So that's good. The disadvantage is the rest of the board members may get disengaged, right? Because we have now Erin, let her ask all the questions, we're hands off. That's also not good because the governance responsibility for the board resides with the board, not only with one person. So that's important. So that's option one, is hire somebody. Option two is really to get educated. And some people are like that. They really the board members, they really want to learn. So they need to ask the CISO or somebody else to really teach them at least the basics of cybersecurity so they can ask the right questions. The third option is, to your point, to do nothing, right? Like let's just kind of leave everything else behind and do nothing else. That's I think that's going to be unacceptable over the long term because you're going to get behind. And the problem is this: the personal accountability rules are going to trickle to the board. Now they're going to come after the board members saying, what questions have you asked? Now we're going after the CISO, but what questions have you asked to the CISO to make sure that you're in a good stance? And they're going to look at the meeting minutes. They're going to look at they're going to interview the board members. So one option for the boards, and this is actually maybe a bold prediction. I'm actually interested in Aaron's thoughts on this one as well. A bold prediction is maybe there's going to be a cybersecurity subcommittee of the board in the future. Don't know. I haven't seen one yet, but maybe there's one that I don't know about. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
First of all, amen to that. And if that
Yeah.
happens, I think that would be awesome. But yeah, Aaron, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think I've heard that, but I've also heard like rumblings that the CISO role will be shifting into a more of a SO role, like more of a board level, like the CEO, the CFO, and then the CSO. Like again, this is great that there still will be a CISO that will report to the CSO, and I think that that's probably what's more realistic. Not that I think the committee is realistic too, but I do think that the CSO role, the Chief Security Officer role, is something we're going to see coming in the future, and I think that's great because we need somebody at that board level that has that actual responsibility, so we know where that, so that the people that are reporting up aren't in fear for their jobs or what they're reporting, and the board doesn't just rely on one person. I think that's the trend we'll see.
I think 30% of the companies or people I talk to, I think they are still struggling to hire engineers, let alone actually mature to the level where they have CSO sitting with the board, CISO reporting to CSO, and then your director manager layers, and then the engineer architect, the IC, individual contributor layer. So, but right now, I think that's what we're seeing as the lawmakers and governments are getting mature into looking into cybersecurity as, what we had looked at, I'm sure, 100 or 200 years ago, the speed limits and putting cops to enforce those. So like this is where the new digital era of lawmakers and governments are also getting into. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up. Again, this conversation is very enlightful. This is again the convergence of the SEC guidelines between the disclosures and defining that material cybersecurity incidents is crucial, and the effectiveness of measuring your security controls using continuous security validation is also something that companies, customers, security leaders are adopting. Any final thoughts, Aaron, as we peel off?
Yeah, I think really just embrace those frameworks. There's so much information out there. We talked about NIST for financial institutions. There's a great framework called Sheltered Harbor. It's really tailored to large financial institutions. Well, not large, big and small. Was formed by large financial institutions, but it follows very great frameworks for any financial institutions that want to protect their data. So I think really looking at the frameworks to help start to bolster that incident response planning, cybersecurity strategy, just really embracing, it's not a matter of if, but when. So something's going to happen. So let's just get started.
Just do it, huh? Embrace that. Just do it. Mark, how about you? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, completely agree with Aaron. The only other thing I would say is really start with the basics, right? Just know your assets, know where your data is at. Do all the basic blocking and tackling, right? Patching and access management, configurations, things like that. If you do all of those things, the need for you to disclose an incident is hopefully going to decrease because you'll have fewer incidents. That's the hope, right? And then of course you need to have the right processes around incident management and disclosures. I really think this is an opportunity for anybody in the cybersecurity field to really ask the right questions and get more support and get more funding and be in a better place, hopefully a couple of years from now, in terms of adequate staffing, adequate tooling, and adequate controls, along with continuous monitoring. So use this as an opportunity. It's like being mindful of the opportunity when it arises is going to really help anybody that is in the CISO, in the cyber field, in the risk management area. And by the way, if you're not in cyber, this is a great time to actually think about maybe a career change in cyber and learn. There's a lot of information out there. So I highly encourage people to really think about a career in cyber as well.
Well, with that, I want to thank you both, Aaron, Burke. This was very insightful. Again, I'm sure our audience loved it. And thank you, everybody, for watching us today and listening to us. Thank you.
Thanks.